Okay, today is February 17th, 1975, and I'm interviewing Mr. Milton Greenbaum and Mr. Milton Marcus in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I think we should start by first with the question of the GI Council. First of all, I'd like to know who initiated it, how did it develop, how many people were involved, did you meet on a regular basis, what did you do, Rabbi Miller's role, when did it end? And we'll start from the very beginning. First of all, what was the GI Council?
The GI Council is a group of American and Allied personnel consisting of American soldiers as well as civilians who were engaged in various activities. The group consisted, as I was saying, of GIs and civilians who were stationed in Germany. Many of them were working in censoring mail, a number being of British personnel and some Allied countries. Also, they may have been attached to the HIAS or Joint or one of the other organizations functioning over in Europe at that time.
Now, were they mostly Jewish?
Predominantly Jewish, yes.
Mm-hmm. What percentage would you suggest?
I would say 90 to 95% Jewish.
Now, who initiated the council? Either one of you can answer.
I don't know.
The council initially, prior to Rabbi Miller coming over to Germany, as he did not get there until about May or June of 1946. Prior to that time, there was a rabbi in Frankfurt, Rabbi Friedman.
Herbert Friedman?
Who's now in Israel. He is now
Herbert Friedman, right.
Herbert Friedman. He would conduct services, and also we would meet at the Jewish Welfare House in Frankfurt, and some work was underway, but not really anywhere as near as actively as when Chaplain Miller eventually proceeded to get there. But we had done a few things, and we were meeting there, and at that time we were going out and meeting trains of people who were coming in, and we would meet the trains as the DPs did not have ration cards. And as they would go through Germany, we would visit the trains and take them food and try and do whatever we can for them. And that's the first I recall prior to the time that Rabbi Miller and Dave Marcus arrived in Frankfurt. When they arrived, of course, then the GI Council took more formation.
Well, it wasn't a formal organization until in other words, it wasn't called the GI Council.
No, it wasn't called the GI Council at that time, but it was doing some work with DPs and helping, and DPs were also coming to the welfare house at that time.
Now, once Rabbi Miller came, he and David Marcus and John Lowe were involved in setting it up formally. Is that what took place?
Well, I don't know.
It's something that grew. I don't think there was no setting up formal.
Well, who initiated it? What I'm trying to say is
I think that it came out of a common need from talking to the DPs and various people having ideas and someone saying, well, let's go out to this place and visit them. And I don't really think we ever had any formal organization with officers or anyone in particular. One who had an awful lot to do with it was probably Eliezer Dembitz, who was stationed with me in Bad Nauheim, Germany. And he at that time was acting as chaplain in Bad Nauheim. And he was also active in bringing this about, but it was through just a group of people who started off, I think, as meeting at the welfare house, or more or less as a place to gather, and then it was an outgrowth of a need that was there. But nothing was really, as I recall, a formal meeting or anyone mapping out plans or saying this was your particular job in the organization. Each of us would do whatever we felt we were best capable of doing or whatever we could contribute.
Okay, now, at what point did it become known as the GI Council?
That was, I would guess, somewhere around the summer of '46 if you got that name.
Right, now, at that point, what took place? How are you functioning? Was there, I know that you eventually set up a paper. There was no formal organization.
No.
No formal organization whatsoever.
No.
You just came together, and was there anyone who kind of took over and said, well, today we should do such and such, or there's a need for such an activity? And
well, I think that probably Rabbi Moore probably was closest to this because he would get a lot of information coming through the JWB, and he then knew.
His name there too. The one in charge of the JWB. There's a gray-haired man.
Can't recall his name.
He.
But the people there, that since they were aware of who was coming through and where they were going, and where the DPs were being sent, and eventually other people throughout the area heard of our duties or what we were performing, and we would then get information as to where DPs were going and what places they were going to be staying and who might need this or whatever we could do.
So that Rabbi Miller became a conduit, or he kind of focused the activities?
Focused much of the activities there, but Rabbi Miller arrived in Frankfurt before Dave Marcus. Dave Marcus stayed over possibly about a month later than Chaplain Miller. Miller arrived and started some things, and then Dave came along, of course, and took an active part in it, or spent quite a bit of his effort working on it, as well as some of the other Israeli boys who were all stationed with me in Bad Noheim.
Now
they consisted of Eliezer Dembitz.
Right.
You had.
He was with the U.S. Army, or he was with?
These were fellows who were GIs, whose parents were either born in the United States, or were of United States parents born in Israel, who were inducted into the service in Israel, and most of them did their basic training in Egypt, and then were stationed in Bad Noheim, Germany,
with the
American Army. Some of them, one in particular, had never been to America. The three who were, two or three who were most active was Eliezer Dembitz, who was the Jewish representative, acting Jewish chaplain in Bad Noheim. David Schechter, who later became David Burrell, who was there. There was another fellow by the name of Fish. He was stationed in near Frankfurt. Okay. But there was no one named Fish whose parents owned the King David Hotel, or had some affiliation with the King David Hotel, who was there with us, but he was not as active as these other two by any means. And they, of course, did their part, and we would also was a case of where we would also request things from our various families at home. So they had a part in. They would send clothing to us and shoes.
Okay, now we'll get to that that part now. So we have this bunch of individuals coming together at the Jewish Welfare Board office, and then it becomes a little more formalized, with Rabbi Miller becoming the focus of focusing the activities of the various groups, of the various individuals. Now, how many people are we talking about?
I'd say possibly somewhere between 25 and 50 or 75 people.
Yeah, we get I don't know if we ever got to 75.
We got 25 to 50.
Yeah,
Later on,
really.
after we left Europe, more people became active. Remember, we left in
So, in other words, it was a kind of
progression.
progression, or that as it became
Succession.
more, as more.
As one group of GIs would leave, other people would come in to replace them. As new people would come to Europe or come to Frankfurt or the vicinity of Frankfurt, these people would then replace some of those that were leaving. And the initial group may not have been the same group by any means at the very end, because most of us served our tour of duty and would then proceed home or do other
So
things.
it fluctuated depending upon the number of new replacements that you got.
Correct.
Okay. Now, did you meet on a regular basis?
How we did, I think.
We
I
would
think I'd gone.
we would meet. Well, we would be there for Friday night services usually. In addition to this, we usually had a meeting there on a Wednesday night, I believe, and we would travel in. I know because I in particular had to drive 35 miles or so to get there.
Oh, well, that's an important point. In other words, these various GIs weren't stationed
No,
in the same area.
as I mentioned,
Yeah.
both Dembitz, Schechter, and myself were stationed in Bad Nauheim.
And the center of this activity was
The JWB house in
Frankfurt.
Frankfurt, and you also had some of the people that worked in Hertz, in what was the town where they did the translation? Offenbach.
Mm-hmm.
Where was IG Farber's
Oh.
headquarters?
That was
It was in
Frankfurt.
No, there was
Hirsch. That was right inside of Hirsch.
Right. Well, there was the other town nearby, but the people were stationed in various towns, and
You
within a
originally came-
radius of possibly 50 or 60 miles of Frankfurt.
So originally you came in for the social reason, and then this developed from that.
It came in as a place for Jewish GIs to go,
Mm-hmm.
and then it grew from there.
I'm trying to remember when I first went to Germany. I was in Marburg, where I met Moses Samuels. And I'm trying to remember if we were involved with it up there at all, or not until I was transferred to Frankfurt. Now, Mo was in it in Frankfurt. Was he transferred back down there out of Marburg?
He was transferred out of Marburg, I believe.
And that's when he got into it too.
Right.
I think the first
Right.
time we met, some of them was possibly for the holidays up in Kassel.
We all had different units, and somehow or other we all seemed to filter to the same spot, and ultimately this is what was the outgrowth of this need.
Now, you got together on Friday nights, and Rabbi Miller was the chaplain.
Subsequently, Miller was the chaplain, but Miller did not necessarily conduct the services there at all times, if I recall. He could probably answer that better than I could.
Okay, fine. Well, but in other
Yeah.
words, what I'm basically interested not so much in the services, but his role in the council, and that
Right.
there was if you didn't meet specifically on Friday night for the council, then at least basically Wednesday night was set aside
I
for
believe so.
for the
I don't remember. It was
meeting.
one night a week. I'm sure we
One
had.
night a week,
It
which
was one night a week, and
Yeah.
then there was Sunday we would usually go out.
one night a week to what? To plan what you were going to
We
do,
would usually
coordinate.
we'd usually discuss where we were going to go that Sunday, or
Now,
have
how
some
is it?
general discussion, or talk about the problems the DPs were having.
Now, who initiated these discussions? Who led them?
Usually it was an open discussion, and all of us would take part in them. If I recall, probably the Israeli boys had as much to say about it as anybody, but we all ventured our own opinions, and
Well, who was the chairman?
there was no such thing as a
We
chair. We would just
weren't
sit
that
around.
formal.
We would just sit around and just talk about. And this one would say, "Well, we want to go out and visit Camp Wetzlar or wherever it is, and who'll get this or who'll get that, or we'll meet at 9 o'clock or 8 o'clock or whatever hour of the morning it was, and that's the way it would work. And there was nobody who was we would say would be the chairman or had any formal title.
Mm-hmm. And what role would Rabbi Miller play in this?
He was the conduit for the whole operation, and he would obtain information and let us know where the people were going. And
So at this meeting, you would call upon him to suggest?
if he was there, he would suggest, or he would give us some ideas as to what he felt as to where our services might best be served on that.
So sometimes you operated with him, and other times you operated without him?
Correct.
And if he was there, then it was helpful, and if it wasn't
Right.
so, somebody else took over?
Right.
Okay. Now, what were the type of things that, we're talking now May of '46, what were the type of activities that you were involved with?
The main thing, I think what it really boiled down to was just the fact that you would go out and they would see you. And they felt that somebody came. And then we would bring what we could, which was really not that much. When we go out to camp, we'd take a few things and give it to, it was kind of hard to give away because there were so many people. We used to give it to someone in the camp to distribute.
I believe.
What little we had.
I believe that there was three main purposes. Number one, it let the DPs know that the Americans or Allied personnel that were there did care about them or hadn't forgotten them. It gave them an opportunity to talk to us or get things off their chests. They would tell us about their relatives in the States. Some of them would talk to us about old places where they were going. Very few of them, if ever, discussed the atrocities or what they had gone through. So that we served as more or less someone to get some of their little things off their chest. Two, we would take whatever we could to them in the way of food that we could round up or possibly some clothing.
Now, how would you do that?
Well, one way was through writing to our various parents and other people back in the States, asking them if they'd be good enough to send things to us, and we would get a number of packages.
Were you allowed individually to accept packages?
The packages were sent to us in our own names.
As military, yeah.
So that I know my parents rounded up a lot of shoes and clothing for their people they knew, and they were sent to us, and we would see that these were dead. We would then sort them out and distribute them. Two, we would go out particularly with the children, and we would play with them. We'd play ball with them. We'd dance with them. Bring over cake and ice cream and give them things that they were not privileged to have. We would, with some of the older fellows our own age, we would play ball. We would play basketball or soccer with them. We would kill them in basketball, and like guys was what they would do with us in soccer. And we overall try and get to meet the people and let them know that we were there. And also some of them would ask us to mail letters to somebody they had back in the States, or if we could drop a note to someone in their family and say we saw so-and-so, or we were privileged to send out letters at no cost, being GIs, and so they would give us letters and say, will you put it in your envelope and mail it back to the States, which we would do. So overall, whatever we could to, in our own little way, to work with them, and I think we really got as much or more satisfaction out of it than they did.
Now, with regards to the letters that you sent, did you do this in any systematic way? Or was just an individual came up to you and said, well, I would like you to send a letter, or was it a policy?
No,
individuals.
Individuals would walk over to you and say, would you do this, or would you take this letter, and I have somebody at such and such a place, and would you mail the letter off for me? And you try and do it if you can to help them out.
Now, was the Army helpful to you? Did they understand what you were doing and appreciate the fact that you were taking Sundays off and taking food, etc. to the?
I don't think the Army really cared too much one way or the other. At least
I don't know if they knew about it really.
From our function, at least while I was there, when I was attached with Army Exchange Service, and as far as I know, Army Exchange Service had no knowledge of it.
Now, what were you able to do as being with that organization?
Well, occasionally I'd get some ice cream I'd get ice cream, or I'd get some excess that they might have from Army Exchange Service, and if I could do that, I'd help out in that fashion. Or whatever we could get our hands on that we thought would be some value to them.
Was there any a rating of various depots or whatever, PX to get material,
We buy
No,
stuff. I worked for the PX
Yeah.
too, and I would buy, I could buy cases of chocolate. You could buy all of that you wanted. I didn't smoke, so I could always get money from cigarettes that
for sure.
to cover what I would buy. It was not a big problem.
Well,
We could buy from the PX. We could buy anything but
In other words, you
cigarettes.
never liberated anything for
No,
that purpose.
not really. We didn't have
No,
to.
there wasn't that, we weren't requested to, we didn't, as far as I can recall. It was just a matter of people.
Then we could get and just take out,
In there.
and the fact that what we took out was never enough. It was like a drop in the bucket for what you would, find they would need. But like I say, I think the main thing was just the fact that we came out. And they saw some American uniforms besides they used to complain that there would be the Polish guards on the gate and they were still behind the barbed wire and the Germans are walking up and down the roads.
I think what Slim's trying to point out is that the Germans had it far better because they were already stationed and were giving out ration cards, whereas the displaced persons who were transients were going through and were not permanently billeted.
Mhm.
Accordingly, they did not have ration cards and were not getting a set allotment of food.
Mhm.
And because of this, their needs and living conditions were different than from those of the Germans who were there. And they obviously were still in worse conditions than the Germans who were defeated.
Mhm. Now, do you know anything about John Lowe's efforts to set up a package program? I was told by Rabbi Miller and by John Lowe that one day, for instance, there were 2 boxcars of material that had come in from Forest Hills, that he had set up a...
John went, to his parents and his parents were in the shoe business and were fairly influential in that area. And they did do a number of things. And I recall after returning in approximately 1947,
When in 47?
I would say in the spring, somewhere around April or May, meeting in Forest Hills, New York, at John's house. And there, a number of us who had returned met with John, and were still at that time collecting things and doing things and working to
Packing
send.
packages at that
Yeah,
time.
we worked over sending out a number of packages at that time, getting things together to send out to the GI Council members that were still there at that time.
Were there many people who continued that activity once they got back? Was this on a regular basis, or was it a one-time shot?
No, after we got back, all of us still, I can't say all of us, but a number of us still continued to do things to help those
For example?
that were still there. Well, we came back, the example I gave you was meeting in New York and working on packages and getting things together to ship over, with all this big material being stored there in New York. A number of us spoke to various people we knew. I spoke at Har Zion Temple in that, after I had come back, Stan Goldsmith had asked me to come over there and talk to them about the duties. And I know Stan had gone to Har Zion members or young people lead there and had asked them to contribute or to get things together. And when I came back, he asked me to come out there and speak to them, which I did. And so there was a group there that was working on getting things together, as well as talking to some of the other people.
Now, was this in other areas as well? You talked about Forest Hills, they were dealing with it.
Philadelphia, there was some-
Philadelphia.
right.
Was there other areas that you know of?
Where other ex-members
Yeah.
of the GI Council or members of the GI Council, their families had done things, and there were some things from Chicago and some things from New England. So it was not concentrating in one place. It was where every person could do its own little thing to help, however small or great it may have been.
And how extensive, if you know, was this speaking about what you had seen?
I don't think it was that extensive. I think that it was just occasionally here and there. There was no set schedule or pattern as far as I know, at least not in Philadelphia now. What may have taken place in Forest Hills or other parts of New York, I can't really say.
Do you remember that package program in particular that John Lowe mentioned?
I remember his parents working on a program, and I remember when we went over to New York, helping specifically to get a number of
Oh,
packages.
this is when he was there already. He was.
This was where he
still
had
there.
already returned, I believe, that the packages, I know that,
Well, the packages he
Yeah.
was saying was there already.
well, John may have remained there. After I left, John was still there. So the packages he was probably referring to may have arrived after I left, because I don't recall. I left there in December of 1966. And
What?
December of 1966, I left Germany.
66?
46,
46, yeah.
December of 46, I left Germany. And if these arrived subsequent to that period, I was not there at the time. At least I don't recall it.
So prior to that, to the best of your knowledge, it was simply a matter of individuals who were involved in this. In other words, you wrote, and
Yeah.
a number of other people wrote and said, send as much as you can. Now you mentioned that this was an allied GI council.
Yes, there were a number of people who were stationed at Firth, I believe, or Offenbach, where there was a group that did work in translating, and a number of the people were either British in particular, and some from some other countries, who were capable of translating letters in foreign languages to English.
Mm-hmm.
And these people also, some of them may have, for example, where I was stationed in Bad Nauheim, there were a number of Allied personnel, because there were offices, and these people were civilian personnel, and they worked for either branches of the United States government or something to do with the military, and they would also partake or join with us
Mm-hmm.
in helping the displaced persons.
What percentage or how many are we talking about?
I can think of at least 12 or 15 of these people who were
You
there.
also remember those?
I could look at pictures and say, well, that was, but it's hard, I don't remember that many.
Yeah, these, I think if you take a look, yeah, as indicated in that picture there, you see where there's a British civilian right there who had helped us at that time.
Mm-hmm.
These were, so there were a number of them.
We're looking now at a number of pictures that appear in an unnamed magazine. This looks like a very big operation that you're involved in here. Packing packages, went to the Wetzlar camp, WETZLAR.
Keep us working on.
This one
Yes, that's a.
There were other aspects of the GI Council work which we did not discuss, and that is, I saw one copy of the Liberator, in which there's talk about presenting or performing Shalom Aleicham's Mazel Tov. Do you remember that particular aspect?
I believe that took place after we left.
Uh-huh. It seems that first of all, they were performing, and they also had gotten children to act themselves. Now, in 1947, there was also talk that there was a change in direction of the council's activities, that it switched from direct help, which the type you were talking, to rehabilitation. There was an effort to get libraries started, to collect sports and educational material. Do you remember that at all?
I remember hearing about it.
From the States?
No, since I was back in the States, I remember hearing some requests about it and having some communication about it, but we were not there at that time.
Right.
We were already back. And I know that in one of the newspapers there was an article that I had written when I returned somewhere in early 47, I attended a function of Hungarian Jews, and it was a dinner dance or something, and I recall writing an article and forwarding it to David, who was still there, pertaining to what was taking place, how the people were concerned for a short period of time, but then afterwards it faded very quickly from their memories.
Well, after reading through some of the Jewish press of that period, there seems to be a lessening of interest over a period of years.
Correct. Many of the people did not realize what was going on, and also about that time or shortly before that.
Why wouldn't they know?
Well, many of them, shortly before that time, many of them had received notice about the death or loss of many of their family. Many of them were still interested in their own particular family, but they did not look at them too much as a group. And the people, I believe, wanted to get away, wanted to get out of their memory the disasters or what was taking place. And so many of the American people, unless you brought it up to them, did not really want to discuss or weren't too worried about it.
We're talking about the Jews?
The Jews in America did not appear to be that overly concerned about it. The ones that did express an interest in it seemed to be in a minority more than the majority.
So you when you came back here, you felt this apathy?
To some degree, yes.
Did you also feel that?
Yeah, well, of course, I didn't get so involved with it once I got back. And I came back, it was right after Milton. Milton came in December. I came in February of 47.
Mm-hmm.
So it was sort of, we were there in the beginning of the GI Council, and I guess it was really only about 6 months, 7 months.
Yes.
That's about all we were involved with. But when I came back, I got involved with other
I
things.
believe about 6 or 7 months.
So you're involved in the 67 months?
In Europe.
In Europe, right.
That was from the formation of the time we left.
Right. Now, when did the GI Council stop functioning?
I would say, as far as I know, somewhere about 1948, I would guess.
Mm-hmm.
I can't tell you the exact date because...
From 1946 to 1948.
Approximately, yes.
Mm-hmm. Now, was there anything else with regards to the GI Council that you felt we should discuss? Was there anything else about Rabbi Miller's role in this activity that we have not mentioned?
Well, Rabbi Miller, as probably mentioned to you, I know was actively engaged while we were in Belgium in helping the Jewish Brigade. I know that he and Dave spent time in getting and smuggling out or helping them get weapons.
Were you involved in getting weapons out?
Just in some small way giving weapons to them, but no way was I was not driving the Jeep as Dave was or doing any of those particular functions. I know that the DPs also, after a while, got to, at least the ones in Frankfurt, became to know that we were there, and many of them, or some of them, would come to the Jewish Welfare Board house, and if they had problems that they needed some help with. In particular, they would come there and they would talk to us, especially if we could talk the language, if they were having trouble speaking English and we were capable of speaking the language that they were conversant in.
Mm-hmm.
Would serve a purpose by going over their problems or helping them in some particular area. And if they needed something or mentioned that they needed something we could do for them, we would go out of our way to do it. So...
Did you ever have to call upon the chaplain for assistance in any of your work?
If there was something that we needed to requisition or needed in some way, we would call upon it. But mainly it was Dave that would go to chaplain more than any of the GIs themselves individually.
Mm-hmm. You used Dave Marcus as a liaison.
Yes, because he was there.
He was there. He was the assistant to the chaplain,
Mm-hmm.
and
But what I'm trying to ask basically is what function did the chaplain play during that?
He was the leader, and having been with Joe Miller in Belgium prior to there, he was an inspiration and guided us or helped us in putting this whole thing together or gave us the encouragement we needed. After all, we were all mainly for the GIs. We were all in our late teens or early 20s, and Miller, being maybe 5 or 10 years older than us, gave us a certain amount of cohesion or leadership that we required.
Which you probably wouldn't have had you not.
I would say that the people that gave us the most leadership in that sense would probably be Dembitz, who was, even though he was relatively young, had a certain amount of maturity and calm and know-how in organizing and working and keeping the group on a straight line, because.
So it was like between the two of them, between Dembitz and
Miller.
And Miller, these were the two strengths.
I would say that they had the most, if I were to venture, which two added the most, although everybody had some part and everybody did something.
Right, but I'm trying to understand it from almost a sociological point of view in terms of how it developed and what kept it together. Now, you mentioned Rabbi Miller being a cohesive element.
Correct.
And would you say Dembitz also was that?
Yes.
And do you think that it would have developed on its own without Miller and just Dembitz there?
It's hard to say. It's anyone's guess. I think something would have been done.
Well,
Whether
it
would have-
existed before, so we know that.
Yes. Now, whether it would have gone on the fashion it did and grew as it did
Mm-hmm.
without Miller and Dembitz is pure conjecture.
Mm-hmm. Well, without Miller and just Dembitz.
Without Miller, well, Miller had a lot to do with it. Whether it would have, I think that even without him being there, possibly we would have still have done things. But I think that because there were some things done prior to the time that he arrived there, but nothing to the degree or the multitude that took place after he did get there.
Now, is his being a chaplain help you in any way in that sense, or just it was the fact that he was that type of individual?
Well,
His position.
He was the highest ranking amongst us, and had inroads or could make requests or do certain things that we possibly could not do. And he may have had, well, if we needed possibly trucks or things such as that, I assume that he was able to requisition or get them for us because.
Well, what had you done prior to that for these?
Well, I was able to.
Press you, but it's very important for me to.
I was able to get.
Focus.
In the position I was in, I was able to get a Jeep or a car most any time, but being able to get trucks or get various things that we might need to pick up, it took someone who was able to requisition them or say, let's have a truck, or because we're going to take X people out, or we need a Jeep with a backup to carry a certain amount of equipment. And it was Miller to a great extent, or Dave Marcus under Miller, who was able to arrange for these things.
Fine. Well, that gave me a picture that I'm interested in. Was there anything else that you wanted to mention before we end that aspect of it? Also the GI Council as such, also to many of us was a social group, as well as it was a organization to ADPs, and many of us may have taken part in it because as much for the sake of a social function as it was the opportunity to aid the others, in all honesty, because it was a place to here you were a young kid, so to speak, in a foreign country, and it gave you something to do on a weekend or an evening, or something to look forward to doing, and it also, to a degree, made you feel that you were doing something worthwhile and gave you some inner satisfaction. Now, you mentioned Rabbi Herbert Friedman.
Yes.
Could we be more specific about what you remember with him?
Well, my memory of him is rather vague because he was just there a short period of time prior to leaving, and at that time Rabbi Miller came and replaced him, together with this fellow whose name was, I believe at the time, Jordan Weiss, if I recall, and he was the fellow who worked with Miller for a while, and then Dave Marcus subsequently, about a month later, joined him. When he came there, he came over one day to the Jewish Welfare House and met us there, and I recall we had services and things going on, and when Rabbi Miller came there, of course, I was the one GI that knew him, having been stationed with him in Belgium prior to his getting there, and then things started to move at a faster pace than they had before.
Now, with Rabbi Friedman, you mentioned the fact of trainings. Was there anything else that you wanted to mention about that aspect?
Not too much outside of helping them to, if they were coming through, getting them something, giving them something on a train, or possibly getting them seats on trains. If there were Germans, we may have chased the Germans out of a seat or something and try and give them a seat, and do whatever we can to help them.
And your experiences with Rabbi Friedman were very positive.
The short experiences I have with him.
Right.
Yes.
No, but I mean, you saw that he was very much
Yes.
involved with
Correct.
helping the DPs. And this
Right.
very
He was
important.
concerned with them.
Fine. Now, were you involved in any way with UNRWA? Did you notice the Rabbi Miller involved with UNRWA or with the Jewish Agency? Or?
I know that Rabbi Miller was involved with the Jewish Agency.
Mhm.
As to what extent, I couldn't answer
You
that.
don't.
I think that was the one nice thing that we were separate from UNRWA. And I think the people, when we went out to camps, distrusted UNRWA for some reason, because the way it was distributed, they felt there was a lot of rake off from the top. And I think they felt that we were doing more, although we had less than
I think it
UNRWA,
was the
because we were more of a personal touch,
Right.
where we came direct to the people. And where UNRWA would have, they used to get mad, they would have a director in a camp who had a very pretty German secretary, and worried more what was going on between the director and the secretary than what was coming out to the people.
Mm-hmm.
So we sort of, I think, bypassed UNRWA completely.
Do you remember who that director was?
No. But this is what you would get from the people, and for some reason UNRWA was a big organization, and whether they trusted it or they didn't trust it, we came right to the people. We drove right past the main gate, the main office. We went right into the camp, and I think there was, like I say, it was more the personal touch of just being with the people that meant an awful lot. I couldn't speak Jewish or Hebrew, but I was there.
And you were able to communicate with him?
Well, a few.
Uh-huh.
A few. But like I say, it was just the main thing that we were there. I remember one camp with UNRWA, they'd gotten a meat and they were so mad it wasn't kosher. And they had said, we spent so much time in the camps, in concentration camps. And they buried the meat, they wouldn't eat it. Because UNRWA was quite upset.
In Bad Nauheim, some of us, such as Dembitz and Dylan Burrell and myself, attended certain functions that were taking place there. At the high holidays, it was Eliezer Dembitz that arranged for us to have the only synagogue that was still standing in that area to hold services in Bad Nauheim, and we also visited with some Hasids that were there, and went out and visited some of the Jewish people who were living in that town or were staying there at that time, so that we did other things individually, as I'm certain that many other members of the GI Council did, which were not part of the main function, but separate little things that we all engaged in.
Anything else you wanted to add? Any final comments?
Just that I think in mentioning Chaplain Miller, his wife was there, and I felt that she was a great asset to him as well, because she was relatively young and managed to mingle or do well with the various women that joined us in the group, and the fact that we did have a number of women in the group made it overall group, and each person seemed to, the women did well with the younger kids, and some of us who were athletically inclined did better with the older group, and fellows like Melvin who had their talents in taking pictures, and we had fellows who were capable of speaking various languages, and overall, I think that we, to a certain extent, were able to understand these people a little better than we could have otherwise. We got to know them, and many of them were, I recall someone saying to me one day about when you would see some of these people break down and cry, and someone said to me, well, don't feel sorry for those that are crying, feel sorry for those that can't cry anymore, because it was something to see kids 7, 8, 9, 10 years old who never had any clothing and probably never recalled their parents or recalled very little about their parents whatsoever. And we were like big brothers to them. And so whatever we did, I assume did bring satisfaction to some of these people,
Now,
gratification to us.
I'm sorry. One of the last things I wanted to ask you was that when you had these strategy meetings on Wednesday evening, did you go to one place on Sunday, or did you spread out and go to a number of places?
For the greatest extent, as I can recall, we all went to one place. Maybe upon a rare exception, we may have split up. As a general rule, the whole group of us went to
So,
a different camp, but usually a different camp each week.
Yeah, or a different
So
place.
Very
But
seldom
we went
we're
as a
back to the
group.
same camp.
But we went as a group. We did not split up.
Well, how many? So you descended upon one campus, one unit.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Now, what was the? How many? You say you didn't come back to the same camp.
We
You
did.
never
right?
came back?
We did in some instances, but
There
ordinarily
was so
we
much
tried-
work that.
Well, there were different things to be done in different camps that people were at, and
In other words,
remember
there was
we
no
would
follow
go.
up.
We would go back in certain instances
Yeah.
and visit a place later on, but we would not go to the same place 2 weeks in a row, or maybe even twice in a month. We might go back and visit a place that we had been to possibly 3 months later, but as a general rule, we would go out and visit some different place each particular Sunday, because there were enough camps and enough different places around within a radius of 50 or 80 miles of Frankfurt that we could go out and visit or get to. And from the religious point of view, some of us would take part in the services. Some of the DPs were surprised that some of us had had Hebrew training. They didn't realize that Americans did have this type of training, and they for some of the other ones there was sessions where people would sit around and discuss things, as well as when we did visit a camp, there were different groups that did different things, and there was no formal assignment where someone was said your job would be to do this or to do that. You just did whatever came, whichever way happened to fall.
But you knew before you went into a camp that certain problems exist in this camp, and
We knew that the camp itself was in squalor, or we knew that these people needed blankets or needed beds or had not had a square meal or could use, or the kids would obviously like candy. We knew that the camp had so many young people or so many old people, or how many people would be expected to be in the camp. We knew where they had come from mainly. We knew a little bit about how long they had been in Germany. These facts we may have known, but
how did you know that? From Rabbi Miller, was it?
generally speaking, Rabbi Miller were one of the people who were closer to the JWB house would have the facts on it and usually mention it briefly to us, although there was no formal outlining as such as I can recall.
But you had a general idea of what you were going to see, and what your
Right.
needs were.
Right.
Did you ever work with the JDC?
No, I did not work with them.
You know, in other words, this was it funded in any way by JWB?
Wasn't funded by anybody, except ourselves.
Except as far as I know, JWP may have had a few things there that they received in the form of contributions, which they might help us have. And they, of course, permitted us to use their facilities to meet and gather and so forth. But I don't recall them as such giving us or saying, here's X dollars and go out and acquire this, this, or this.
Now, how many camps would you say that you saw while you were there?
It's hard to recall, but I don't really know whether the number would
Few
be.
stick out in my mind, but
I know whether we may have visited 10, 15, or 20. I don't
In
know.
a year?
that.
In a year?
During these 6 or 7 months that we
Excuse
visited
me,
them.
6-7 months. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I would say maybe 10 or 12, something like that.
So that means you did
15.
repeat. You
We did repeat some,
some,
but
there was one, I remember we went out and they wanted to put them, it used to be a stable.
Yeah.
And they had put inside the stable, just partitions. And in between the partition was for one family, and it was 2 stories high inside. And where the alleyways went through, or the pathways, they had the 55-gallon drums welded together for a stove, and it was like a fire trap you couldn't believe, and they refused to go in it. And the people in charge of the camp couldn't understand why. It was better than what they had. And then again, they would point outside at the beautiful the homes and the farms where the Germans were living, through the barbed wire, and they said, well, here we are still in there. If the fire would have started, they would have never gotten out. I remember going back to there a couple of times.
Do you remember where that was?
Remember that? I think I even might have had a picture of it at a distance, showing the things. Remember that one, Milt?
Yeah.
That was
the name of recall the names of them. It was a little difficult this time.
Did the people write to you, or there's no way? How did they communicate to you and say, "Well, we'd like you back," or "We have a problem," or?
Well, the camp leaders would ordinarily talk to Joe Miller, and Rabbi Miller would talk to the head or the people who acted as in charge of the camp. We in turn were, or at least I was too busy playing with the kids or doing something to get into very much of that function, so I couldn't answer that. I know that if these people would request something occasionally, somebody would say afterwards that these people had said to us, could we do this or do that, and then we would attempt to do what they may have asked of us. If they needed something particular, if they needed some blankets or some clothing or whatever it may have been, if we could do it, we would then try and see if we couldn't get it together.
Did you come back and evaluate what you had done, what you had seen? Was there any evaluation?
As far as I know, nobody kept a log book or wrote.
No, but I mean, let's say Sunday you went one place, and then came back, and Wednesday or Friday night you said, well, Wednesday would have been the first time you got together, and you said, gee, that was a very good experience. We've learned from that. We made certain mistakes. We should do this in the future. We could help them in the.
Yeah, but it seemed to me at that one camp there was one little kid with a bad ear or something. Was something done?
Yeah, I recall somebody with a kid with bad ear.
Bad ear. I remember that at that camp, and I don't know if we went back or if something was gotten for it, penicillin or what.
I don't know what we said.
I forget. I remember they requested it was one with a very bad ear infection.
By the way, this is a picture of Chapter Miller's wife. Right here.
So there was no follow-up. It was just simply a matter of.
Well, as far as I know, unless there was if there was something particular, something was required as possible, that somebody may have driven the car out there and taken the item out to them the following week or some night, or run out there and give it to them.
And this was actually the only time you had free time to work in this.
No, we had our nights as a general rule, and the weekends, but mainly it was Sunday.
Well, there was no opportunity during the weekdays to do anything, or weeknights to do anything?
Well, most of these places were pretty far away. It was hard to get transportation. It was hard to get all the people together.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, most of it did not take place very much during the week outside of the some of the DPs who may have been in the location of Frankfurt itself, and a few of us went out and visited some of them at nights and spoke to some of them.
Oh, so there was activity even during the day with those in Frankfurt.
In Frankfurt, there may have been some activity with those at night, more so. I can't say during the day, because I was
Day,
not in
on our
Frankfurt
jobs.
during the day, but at night, I recall visiting a few DPs.
On a regular basis?
No.
No, sporadically.
Mm-hmm.
I remember, was it Hershey went down one time and saw, Ben Gurion was visiting a DP camp? You remember that night?
Yeah, I remember something there.
Yeah, going down there.
Yeah.
It was there were a lot of DPs down there. Wasn't there a big camp? Was it a camp or just they were gathered down in that one city?
I think they were gathered there. I don't recall, too much about that time. But no, we did get to visit some.
Okay,
Okay.
fine. Now, I just want to know your addresses so that we can send you a transcript of this.
Well, you want my office address or my home address?
Whichever is best for you. It's 80.
It's 8400 Bustleton Avenue, Philadelphia, PA, 19152.
And what is your?
Mine's, what was it, 30? Yeah, holy mackerel.
Your home
22.
address.
You want me to get your tax return?
Yeah, but I look at it, holy mackerel, all of a sudden I got a blank mind here. 4232 Whiting Road. That's great.
In
That's the
Philadelphia.
funniest thing all night.
and what's your zip?
19154.
You sure you're living, sir?
I'm not sure.
Okay. I was stationed in Bad Nauheim, Germany. I was a sergeant at the time. I was attached to Army Exchange Service headquarters. And the fellows with me, Eliezer Demitz was a corporal with the attached to the chaplain section of the base in Bad Nauheim, and I believe, if I can recall, David Schechter was a PFC probably at that time, and he was attached to some office group in Europe. There. So you can,
Yeah.
you were with it.
Well, I was the PX, working for the PX, the PFC, and European, what was it, European Theater?
European Theater of Operations.
Yeah,
Yeah, but there was the headquarters for European Theater.
USAF,
Yeah. At that
United
time.
States Army Expeditionary Forces.
Yeah. And my main job was just procure
You were a procurer?
stuff for the PX, go around and pick up supplies.
European.
So I was able to get a few extra things, or in larger quantities than just buying it through the regular PX.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.